Hey guys, the topic of today's video are two special types of checks in chess called discovered checks and double checks. And they are going to play a role in this position right here where it's black to play and win. Now this is a more complicated position, so what we're going to do is go through the material in this video, and then at the very end we're going to come back to this position and see if you can solve it given the knowledge that you're going to learn. All right, so having said that, let's jump back to the very beginning and talk about discovered checks. So if you've never heard the term before, a discovered check simply means you move one piece out of the way and a piece behind it delivers the check on your opponent's king. So we can see right here, we have the rook lined up with the king. All we have to do is move our bishop really anywhere that we want to. Any bishop move on the board, right, is going to put black's king in check because it unleashes our rook. And why is this such a good thing for us? This is very powerful because let me give you an example here. Similar position, but not the same. In this case, we have a check with our bishop. We move our bishop, we put the king in check, and the king just simply moves out of the way, right? There's nothing special about that. It's just we attack the king moves, and the game goes on, but it was very easy for our opponent to deal with. We can go check again, but again, the king just moves, maybe it moves here, and we don't have any good moves, we're losing the game, right? Because those are just normal checks. But you compare that, going back to this position, now when we move our bishop with check, we can actually accomplish something really good. We could go here, put the king in check, and next move, we're going to take this rook for free. Or even better, we could play bishop to b6 check, and next move, we're going to take the queen. Do you see how that works? Because this bishop is not the piece that's doing the checking, we are free to move it wherever we want. Normally, we couldn't move here. We would just lose our bishop. We would just be giving away our bishop for free. But in this case of a discovered check, we can totally get away with that. So you can see how powerful this can be. You just have to find where the best place is to move your piece to. Okay, so let me give you another example here. There's one thing that we do have to watch out for, and it's if the piece is attacked that's going to be delivering the check. Because in this example, let's say we went for this, black doesn't have to move the king like they did before. Now they can actually just take our rook. Now it's still good for us. We still take the queen, but we are going to lose our rook, which maybe was something that we didn't want to. So keep that in mind when you're doing these discovered checks. Make sure that the piece isn't being attacked that's doing the checking. All right, so we've talked about discovered checks. Now I want to talk about something known as a double check. Now a double check is also a discovered check, but it's a special kind of discovered check. And just as the name implies, you're checking your opponent's king two different times at the same time. It's pretty rare, but whenever you have it, it's usually extremely powerful. So given that knowledge, what's the best move in this position for white? Well, if you had a chance to do that, the best move is bishop to e6, double check, because we're attacking the king with the rook and the bishop. And believe it or not, this is actually checkmate, which is amazing because normally, if a bishop is checking you, you can block it with the knight or with the rook. But in this case, you can't because you would still be in check from the rook. And if you try to block the rook check with like a knight move or a rook move, well, you're still in check with the bishop. And if you try to take that bishop, you're still in check with the rook. And if you try to take that rook, you're still in check with the bishop. And so the only way to get out of a double check is to move your king. That's the only way. You have to get off of the square that's being attacked twice. But in this case, black can't do that. You can't come here or it's still check. You can't come here, it's still check. And so the game is over. We just won the game, even though we only have two pieces left, because of the power of the double check. Okay, so I want you guys to keep this in the back of your mind. Like I said, it's kind of rare, but usually when you have opportunities to do double checks, there's going to be some really good tactic available. You just have to find what it is. Now, in this position, you might have been tempted to say, oh, I'll take this rook with check, which is okay, it's decent, but then you're going to lose your rook and you're still losing the game, right? You only have a bishop. Or you might have been tempted to say, you know what, I'll go check here to win the queen. But in this case, again, you're going to lose your rook. Yes, you get the queen, but the game goes on and black's going to win. And so you have to look for the very best check available. In this case, it was the double check, checkmate. All right, so that's what discovered checks and double checks are in these sort of made-up positions that don't really occur in real games. Now let's see some tactics of how they happen in real games. We're going to be starting with some very basic positions, working our way up through intermediate, and at the very end, we're going to try to tackle that advanced problem that I showed you If you're a more advanced player, you want to jump to some of the intermediate and advanced ones, I'll put timestamps below. But for everyone else, I recommend you just watch it all the way through. You're going to learn something on all of these tactics that ultimately is going to, increase your knowledge of discovered and double checks. So let's go ahead and get started. Here is the first position. It is white to play. What is the best move for white, given the information that you've already learned in this video? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the best move is knight to f6 checkmate. And it's checkmate because, again, we have a double check, which remember, whenever you have a double check, you don't have to worry about losing one of those pieces because your opponent has to move their king, right? And so we can get away with this because black has to move their king, except the problem is they can't move the king anywhere. This is covered, this is covered. That's why it's checkmate. Now, you may have been tempted to say knight to d6 check is also a good move. And this is close, but it's wrong. Why is it wrong? Because remember, the king has to move. Well, now the king can move to d7, and now we have a problem. We have two pieces being attacked instead of just winning the game with checkmate, right? So notice the difference. Knight to f6 actually controls the square that the king wants to move to. So you want to be paying attention to those little details and choosing carefully when you're looking at these double check options. Okay, so congratulations if you said knight to f6. Let's jump to the next one. Here we go. It's black to play. What move should black play in this position? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move here is bishop to b4. Again, it's a discovered check, but also a double check, which means white's king has to move. And the only moves for white are over here and here, in which we can follow up by bringing the rook down, and that is checkmate. So if you said a different bishop move, like let's say bishop over here, that's not as good, because now we can't deliver the checkmate because our bishop isn't controlling that square, right? So it's important, again, think very carefully when you have these double checks or discovered checks, very carefully about where you want the piece to go, right? In this case, we needed the follow-up rook coming down for checkmate, right? So congratulations if you found that. Let's go to the next one. Here we go. It's white to play. What move should we play here? Well, if you had a chance to look at this, this is actually a common theme. If you can capture this pawn and then bring your queen out with check, usually it's pretty good for you because when your opponent tries to block, you have this little tactic available. We simply take it. And black doesn't want to take us back because then they lose their rook. And so what a lot of people will do is bring the knight out to attack your queen. But now we have a nice move, and this is where the discovered check comes in. We can play g7 check, and normally we wouldn't be able to do this or black would just take us, right? But in this case, they can't because our queen is putting them in check. And yes, we're going to lose our queen in this process. However, getting the pawn here is worth it because we're not only getting our queen back, we're also taking a rook in the process. And so we win black's rook, we get our queen back, and we're in great shape, right? So congratulations if you found that one. Let's go to the next one. All right, so here we go. Now we're kind of entering into the more intermediate level puzzles. And this one is a particular pattern, which is really fascinating. If you've never seen it before, this is probably going to be a difficult one to find. If you've seen it before, you probably already know what the move is. So for those of you who don't know what the move is, take some time to think through what black should play here, and then we'll talk about the solution. All right, if you had a chance to do that, this is what's known as a smothered checkmate position. It's once you see it, you probably won't forget it. But like I said, if you've never seen it before, it's gonna be pretty exciting. So what you do is double check with the queen and the knight, which remember forces the king to move. So we don't have to worry about this pawn capturing us because it's a double check, right? So the king has to move. You can't move here. You have to move into the corner. And this is the hard part if you've never seen this one before. You have to sacrifice your queen. Remember, the knight's defending it, so the king can't take it, which means the rook has to take it, which is exactly what we want because now we've trapped our opponent's king and the knight comes back to f2, this time delivering what's called a smothered checkmate. So this is a really fun one. Like I said, it's a cool pattern. It actually comes up quite a bit in games, and if you're looking for it and you know how to kind of set it up. But once you see it, you'll probably always remember it. And if you haven't seen that before, well, you learned something new. So sacrifice the queen, deliver the smothered checkmate. And remember, it all started with that double check with knight to h3. All right. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, it's black to play. What's black's best move in this position? This one is a little bit more difficult, so take your time, but I think you guys can find it. All right, if you had a chance to look at that, so hopefully you noticed the discovered check here. And, you know, we could do some moves like this, right? Which is check, and then we could take a rook, or knight to b3, it's check, and we could take a rook, which is not bad. But the problem is our queen is being attacked. So we need something more powerful than that, right? We're not going to be in a good position if we take a rook because we're losing our queen. So a better way to do it would be either knight to f3 or knight to e2, because these are double checks, right? Which means black is forced to move. One more thing I should mention, on knight to b3 or knight to c2, white can get out of the check by capturing our bishop, right? Which, again, going back to here, to the double check prevents that. White can no longer do this because they would still be in check. So we force the king to move, okay? So you should have arrived at one of these two moves as being the best move. The question is, which one is the best move? And it has to do with the follow-up, okay? And it turns out after knight to f3, king to h1, there's not really good follow-up for us here. Our knight's in danger. We're about to lose our knight. We don't really have any other major threats. But after knight to e2 check, when the king goes over, now we have a nice little, I don't know what exactly, what kind of pattern this is called, but there's another mating pattern here, and it begins with knight to g3. And remember, this guy is already taken away, so the king can't escape here, which means white has to capture us, which opens up something that was not open before. What is it? This file. That's correct. And now we can simply slide our queen over, and this is a very nice, almost like a back rank checkmate. If you think of a back rank checkmate where the king is stuck along the back rank and can't get out, we're kind of doing the same thing except sideways here. So it's like a side file mate where we're using the bishop to help. So if you've never seen that one, keep this in your mind. This is going to come up in the future, and you're going to want to remember this one. Okay, so that's a nice little tactic there. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, it's white to play and win. What move should we play here as white? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is rook to b5 check. And the reason this move is better than any other moves is because it's a double check, which means, remember, black is forced to move their king. If you try to move like rook takes d6, which at first glance looks like, oh, hey, I'm going to win the queen. This is a good move, right? Black's going to play e4 because they only had one check to deal with. They can deal with it with this pawn, and now you have a problem that your queen is hanging. Even if you take black's queen, you're going to lose your queen, and ultimately this is going to be winning for black. So that's why this move is so powerful. Black can't play e4 because they're still in check with the rook. They can't take you. They're still in check with the queen. Okay, so I'm really trying to hit home the point that when you are in a double check, you have to move your king. And it doesn't matter where black moves, there's going to be this follow-up checkmate regardless. So if they move there, it's checkmate. If they move here, it's also checkmate. Okay, so remember, double checks, extremely powerful. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, it's white to play and win. This one should be an easy one for you, but I wanted to give you some extra practice. What should white play? All right, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is knight to h6 check. This is exactly, almost exactly, like the smothered checkmate that we saw before. You start with the double check. The king goes into the corner. You bring the queen in, forcing the rook to capture, and then you deliver the checkmate with the knight, right? And so notice how once you learn that pattern, whenever you see a position like this, that should just jump into your head. Oh, this is a smothered checkmate. I've seen that before, right? Let's go to the next one. All right, again, it is black to play and win. What move should black play? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at this one actually was a tricky one for me when I first looked at it. And the reason was I was really convinced that the move was one of these two moves because they both look like pretty good moves. Like we're almost trapping the king, and then we can come here, and I just felt like this was a great position, gives us a nice discovered check. I thought this was how we won. I was actually wrong. And the best move is bishop to e2 check, because there's a couple of reasons. Number one, we want to prevent the king from moving here. Why do we want to do that? Well, because we want it to be in the corner. Why do we want it in the corner? Because it's easier to checkmate if it's in the corner than if it's over here where it has more places to escape to. So that's the first thing. The other reason is that we wanted to be able to come back to f3 with our bishop to deliver the checkmate. Okay, so the part where I got confused was I was thinking, okay, this is a great move because it also forces the king into the corner. However, I don't have a way to get my bishop here to deliver the checkmate. Even though this check looks good, it's not checkmate because it blocks my rook. And every time I move my bishop somewhere, the king now can escape, right? You see that? So this one actually fooled me, even though it's not that difficult. I missed it. You need to go here to force the king over, and then you deliver the checkmate on f3, right? So congratulations if you saw that one. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, it's black to play. This is actually a difficult puzzle, but I think for you guys, it's not going to be so difficult. Go ahead and take a look, and then we'll talk about it. All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is knight to e2 double check. And the point is that after the king moves over, we're going to play knight to g3 check, forcing the capture, and then queen to h6 check. And after white sacrifices the queen, it's checkmate. Why did I say that that should be easy for you guys? It's almost exactly like the one we saw earlier, right? We had the knight and the bishop lined up on the king. We had our queen sitting here, and we moved knight to e2 over here and over here. Even though the position is different, right? The white's pieces are not in the same formation as they were before. The tactical idea is exactly the same. And so this is a good example of how once you learn those patterns, even if you're in a, let's just say, a pretty tough position, if you recognize the pattern, you can solve it, right? And that's exactly the case here. Same exact thing, right? You clear the way for the queen along this file, and white has no good way to stop it. This just delays it one move, but that doesn't really help white. All right, so hopefully you guys can see how learning those patterns really can help you as you go forward. All right, let's keep going. Here is a relatively tricky one, but good luck. White to play and win. All right, if you had a chance to do that. So this one is tricky because there's no discovered or double check right away. It happens in a couple of moves. And so you had to see that sacrificing the queen actually led to a nice discovered check in the future. And the way that that happens is, of course, the king can't move, so the rook has to take you. Of course, we can take here with check. If the king goes into the corner, we have checkmate. So that's one part of this puzzle that you needed to see, which means the king has to go this way. And then we have check. And now is the tricky part where this is what you needed to see. We can push our pawn forward with check, forces the king to either go over here where we just get a queen and get checkmate, or to go here. And now what do we have? Now we have the discovered check by moving our pawn. Okay, and this was the important part. We're able to get our queen back with check, and we won black's rook in the process, and the king is running all over the place. And this is ultimately a winning position for white. So that one was much more difficult because way back here, you would have had to, had seen takes, check, king here, knight in, check with the pawn, followed by a discover check. So that's a lot to see. I just wanted to give you an example of a more advanced one that still had a discover check in it, but it happened further down the line, right? Just to kind of give you an idea of how that might show up in a more complicated position. Okay, so if you didn't see that one, don't feel too bad, but I just wanted to point that out. And now, last but certainly not least, probably the most difficult position that we've seen. However, it's got some themes that you guys have already seen. Okay, so I don't want you to give up on this one, even though it's a difficult one. I want you to try to solve it and using the knowledge that we've kind of already seen throughout this video. Okay, so it's black to play and win. I'll go ahead and give you a second to pause and think through that, and then we'll talk about the solution. All right, so when you look at this position, do you remember the smothered mates that we looked at? How the queen and the knight were kind of like lined up in a certain position? You should almost recognize that in this position. So for example, if I were to play the move queen to g5, which by the way, this is not the correct move, but I just want to illustrate something here. If I were to play queen to g5 and the king moves over here and I were to bring my knight in, do you recognize how it's almost similar to like the smothered checkmate that we saw where we're bringing in our knight, we have the queen lined up, we're checking the king, right? And in some of those cases, if the king were to move back here, remember we've seen this idea, right? Where we can go check, creating this sort of double check scenario. And then it was almost like this where we had the smothered checkmate, right? I'm just showing you, it's similar, right? It's similar. That's all I'm trying to get at, right? It's not the same. Obviously, this is not checkmate. The king's going to take my rook and escape. But you should recognize when you look at this position that, okay, there's something going on here that I've seen before, okay? So that's all I want you to take away from there. Now, if you follow that train of thought like I just did, this is what you would arrive at. I go check, he moves, I go check, he's probably going to take my rook. Do I have any follow-ups? No, I don't have a smothered mate. I don't have anything, right? And you might say, oh, there's nothing there. However, this is where really good players will take it one step further and say, wait a second, what if I can mix up the order of moves or do something a little bit different? And so the move for this puzzle is rook to a1 check. And at first glance, it's like, how is that helping me? I mean, I'm losing my rook entirely, right? Here's how it helps you. The rook's going to take. And now, if we follow this train of thought again, queen to g5 check, king to b1, knight to d2 check. Let's just say the king runs over here. What's different about this position? White's rook is no longer here. It's back here. Why does that matter? Look at our rook over here on f8. Now, look at that. And do you remember that other puzzle we looked at where there was a checkmate along the file? Same thing. Look at our knight controlling these squares. Boom, we just come over here. They have to sacrifice their queen, and that's checkmate. Okay? Now, let's go back. It's not over yet. Because after here, the king could actually just go to c1. And now we have to combine the knowledge of the smothered checkmate. So, how do we do that? Knight to b3, double check, so we don't have to worry about this. If the king moves here, this is just checkmate, which means the king has to go back. And what did we do in those smothered checkmate type of patterns? We sacrificed our queen. Why did we do that? Because we wanted to trap the king like this. And that's exactly what we're doing here, but you might say, but he's going to escape, right? But we don't care. Why? Because we have that covered from a different resource. So we play knight to d2 check, and then we deliver the final checkmate over here. Okay, so it's kind of complicated. I'm not going to lie to you. There's a lot going on, but it's really like bite-sized chunks of information that you just put together, right? Go back to the beginning here. You've got the information about this is how a smothered checkmate kind of looks like. You've got the information about, the king, if I do this and the king comes over here, it's stuck on the edge of the board if my knight's there kind of thing, right? You put that together, you put it all together, and ultimately, you come up with this really, really nice checkmate to finish the game. I mean, imagine if you played this in a game. Like, how satisfying would this be to win a game like this, right? And you can do it. None of these concepts were, like, so difficult that you couldn't think of them. You just had to know where to look. So, I really hope that helps you guys. Like, some of these really complicated tactics aren't as complicated as you think they are once you learn to break it down into bite-sized chunks. And I'm saying the same thing over again, so I'm going to stop. But so hope that really made sense. Before I end the video, I just want to mention I have a chess blueprint or a chess tier skill list that lists every single chess skill from you just learned how to play to you want to become a grandmaster. There's 229 skills on that list. And discovered checks and double checks are on the list. So that's why I wanted to make this video, to cover that topic. If you're interested in checking out that spreadsheet, it's essentially just an organized way for you to keep track of what you're learning and to point you in the right direction of what you need to learn next. So if you're like a 1,000 rated player and you're trying to figure, okay, what do I need to learn next? I know some basic openings, I know some tactics, I'm not really sure where to go from here. You would just hop on that spreadsheet and just, okay, what's the next item on the list? Oh, do I know that? Yes, I do. Check it off. Or no, I don't actually know that. Let me see. What do I need to learn here, right? So it's like a reference guide to kind of guide you as you continue your chess journey and learning. So you're not just randomly learning things all over the place. You can learn in an organized fashion. So I'll put a link to that in the description if you're interested. Check that out. 30 years of chess knowledge, and I basically put it into a spreadsheet. So anyway, I will see you guys next time. Stay sharp, play smart, take care.